Hey, everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Fellow Freaks, the little extra interview time from Freaks of the Vine podcast. Our guest today is somebody who had a great impact on me a number of years ago with the music that came out of his band as a bassist and backing vocalist for the wonderful band Galactic Cowboys from 91 until 2000. Monty embarked on a solo career in 2000 with his band project Crunchy. First album, All Day Sucker, released in 2001, defined the crunchy sound as fun pop punk with a slightly heavy guitar edge. On their second album, Clown School Dropout, the band was stripped down to Colvin playing most of the instruments and bringing in hired drummer. Here, Colvin added a bit more crunch to the formula. So in band influences include the Wild Hearts, Cheap Trick, Foo Fighters, and the Ramones, and in addition to the aforementioned Galactic Cowboys. The third Crunchy album, Loserville 2007, included a contribution by Kerry Livgren, our friend here in our state of Kansas, and Colvin contributed to Livgren's 2021 solo release, The Resurrection of Lazarus Cantata, though his part had been recorded 20 years earlier, so we'll have to ask him about that. Our friend is Monty Colvin. Monty, welcome to the show, and we're glad to have you, brother.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So before we kind of venture into some of the things you've been doing, especially with your Rockcast and your website and your wonderful artwork, when did you really start to get involved in music, man?
Well, my first band was probably around 85, I think. And then I moved to Houston and played with a guy named Morgan Cryer, a Christian artist. We toured around the U.S.
I remember Morgan. Yeah.
I was just in his band and just played backup, in his backup band and just on tour, and never did any of his albums or anything. But after that, I was in a band called The Awful Truth for about a year. And then I left that. We actually got signed by Metal Blade and put out one album, but we'd actually already broken up at that point.
Oh.
So we never toured or anything. We played a lot of shows, but I left that and started Galactic Cowboys around 89. And we got signed to Geffen Records and put out our first album in 91. And we were touring for the next 10 years, and then called it quits around 2000, and I started doing the solo thing. Did 3 albums on my own, and then we got back together in 17 for another Galactic Cowboy album.
Okay,
and that's where we're at today.
So obviously you guys still talk, and are you guys doing any shows at all presently, or are you?
Not presently. We've talked about it, and hopefully someday we can do that again. But just right now, there's nothing really going on with us.
Okay. Well, so how I got to know you guys was short story. I started doing a radio program in 1994 here in Topeka. Obviously, you spent a lot of time in Kansas City, so you know where Topeka is.
Right.
By the way, love the Chiefs posters behind you. Nice job, brother. And I had my Brett jersey on yesterday. I should have wore it just for you, man. There it is.
Nice.
But I know you're a sports fan. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I started doing this radio program in 94. I did it for 7 years, and it was a volunteer show where we played music that nobody else was playing in the Christian genre. So we didn't do any type of contemporary or popular stuff. We did at the beginnings, DC Talk and all that, but that's not what people wanted to hear because they could hear it any time. So we were playing anything that we could get our hands on, and we did interviews a lot. And I remember trying to chase down you guys. At the time, you're almost untouchable. So because you guys were big enough at the time where I couldn't get your record company to let me get a hold of you, which was totally cool. You're just always fishing. You see what you can come up with. But I got indoctrinated pretty early on with your guys's If I Was a Killer, a song, obviously was played on MTV at the time. And that was really cool. Congratulations on that success back in the day. But the album that blew me away, without a doubt, man, is Machine Fish. To me, that is one of the pinnacle albums of anybody's library of rock metal, period, end of story. From the opening track until the end, brother, you guys knocked it out of the park, man. And to this day, I just love that album.
Nice.
And I argue with people because they're like, no, it's a horse that Bud bought. I'm like, and then I want to talk to you about that because there's a lot of my friends who think that's like your, that's like your best album ever. But I didn't know the story behind that concept. Can you mind sharing with some of the listeners what happened?
The horse that Bud bought?
Yeah. How you got that title and what happened to you as a young man.
Yeah, that was based on a weird story that was actually true. It was from my childhood. I say childhood. I was actually about 12 or 13, and my family, we lived in Phoenix, and my family, my mom and dad decided that, we were going to sell everything and move to Oregon to be in this religious commune. And we ended up living in this house with like 10 people, and things just got really weird, and it became more like a cult. And we finally got out of there, and I don't know, it just left a lot of mental scars on me.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know that. And so I wrote the song, Oregon, which, was around that concept of, the horse being this horse that my dad had bought me, and his name is Bud, or was. And so anyway, it's a weird story, but that's kind of the essence of it. It was just this kind of weird time in my life that kind of messed with my head. And that was a good way of, I don't know, getting some resolve, was writing that song. And,
sure.
And we were talking about it one day, and Ben said, that'd make a good title, The Horse That Bud Bought. So I don't know if it was or not, but we ended up naming the album that because, we were just a little different back then.
Well, I remember when you guys released Machine Fish. I don't know if it was you that quoted it or Alan or Ben, but you guys said that all your friends of the albums that they were working on, or songs they were working on at the time, either had the word machine or fish.
Yeah.
You guys just decided to go with it.
It was like Rage Against the Machine, Damn the Machine. And then there was Jellyfish, School of Fish. And so we kind of put them together. It was kind of a joke, really. But
yeah. Well, from your writing is all over Galactic Cowboy stuff. So, I mean, as a bass player, I'm also a bass player. I know that writing is not, it just comes to you if you have obviously I'm so good at it. I never did anything with it, but I enjoyed it. I always enjoyed writing and playing, especially metal. But I tell us about how tricky that was for you to kind of come up with songs. Did you write a lot on the bass? Do you play some guitar, or what did you usually do?
Yeah, I started as a guitar player, and I played in a cover band first as a guitar player. And then I found out, a lot of bands need bass players. And so I was like, I can play bass. So that's what I ended up doing for the rest of my career. And I do that now. I play guitar now in my solo thing. But I started out when I was, I guess in college, really. I started trying to write songs, and most of them were terrible. And I just kept working at it. And I was just, I don't know, it was just a real passion to get better and better at it. And, that's sometimes what it takes. Just working at something until you get good at it. And
Sure.
hopefully I did. I did. I wrote a ton of songs for Galactic, and it was just a real passion that I love to do. And it was a way to express myself. And so,
well, I think I don't know what goes into all the intricacies of post-production, or what you got, how much involvement each of you had. But when I listen, and I mean this sincerely, what I said to you earlier about Machine Fish as the album itself, and I'll be the last thing I say about it. But when I listen to it from just the little nuances of things that you guys did, the bass, the tone you have on like Idle Minds, the entire composition of the lens, which is every once in a while, I'll tag you on that. I have this like annual thing. My son makes a joke about it. He's like, every year you tag Monty when you put, or every other year, and you put the lens out there. I'm like, cause it's like the most underrated song of all time. That is like that, and the struggle, and dude, it's just the whole album. Just thank you from a huge fan of yours for putting that album together, brother. But it really had an impact on me and then my kids, because they had to listen to it because they didn't have a choice. They're little and they're in the back seat. So there's that.
Thank you for liking it. That album was actually written after we had gotten dropped by Geffen.
Okay, that was back on Metal, because that was on Metal Blade, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so there was a time period in between when we left Geffen and went to Metal Blade, and it was just a real period of time where we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know if we were going to break up, and in fact, we did for a week or two, because we just didn't know where we were gonna go, what was gonna happen. And so I was writing a lot of songs like this, like Stress, The Struggle, all these kind of, songs that were filled with a lot of angst and frustration. And so, we finally, we were doing demos for all those songs, and we weren't getting a lot of response from labels and everything, because they'd kind of moved on to grunge and stuff like that. And so we weren't really the cool thing anymore. And so we didn't know what was going to happen, but all of a sudden I got a call from Brian from Metal Blade, and he was like, "Hey, I love this stuff. Why don't you guys sign with us?" And so we talked to him and worked it out, and ended up doing Machine Fish. And he loved the album, and we toured. And we did a tour with Anthrax in Europe off that album. And it's probably one of our heavier albums.
Sure.
I still like it.
Slagle's really a kind of a pioneer, isn't he?
No doubt.
I mean, he has had his hand involved in a lot of different bands, but I mean, the guy has been, he just likes music, and he likes to help bands get somewhere. And I have a lot of respect for that guy.
Yeah. He was
from that angle,
Yeah. He originally discovered Metallica and Slayer.
Yeah, he did.
And then he also, had the Goo Goo Dolls for a while. And so he just, that's the great thing about him is, he knows what he likes, and he will sign stuff that he likes. And so he's great. I love Brian.
That's
and
cool.
We'll always be grateful to him for everything he did for us, because he took us when, a lot of labels just were like, "Oh no, they're not cool anymore," and he was like, "No, you guys are very cool." So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Talk about how you got involved with Livgren, Kerry Livgren from Kansas.
That's a great thing. And I love telling this, because when I was 18, I think I was 18 or 19, I went and saw Kansas on the Point of No Return tour. And, the way Kerry would go from keyboards and he'd pick up the guitar and just wail,
Yeah.
And the night I saw them, I was just like, oh my God, I want to be like that guy, because he writes and he plays and, he's just such a genius. And so I was just a huge fan for years. And now fast forward like 20 years later, and I heard that he was going to be in Liberty, Missouri, which was where I lived at the time. And he was going to be at this place down the street. And he played a little bit and he talked for a while. And afterwards he was signing autographs. And I just went over and got in line. And when I got up to him, I went, "Hey, Kerry, I'm Monty. I'm in this band, Galactic Cowboys." And he looks up and he goes, "Man, I love you guys." And I go, "Really?"
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, wow, and it just blew my mind. And I go, "Well, thank you so much for, talking to me." And I turned around, was walking off, and he goes, "Hey, Monty." And I turned around and he goes, "Would you ever want to play on one of my albums?" And I was like, yeah, and
Yeah.
so I think it was about a year or so later, I got hooked up and went over to his studio and
Grand Design in Tecumseh.
yeah, well, it was in Topeka. It was like behind his house. And I went in and he was setting up the mic for me to sing this part, and he showed me what he wanted. And while he's setting up the mic, he's like, "Hey, are the telephone conversations at the end of Where Are You Now, are those real?" And, it was a song we've done where he did this fake conversation at the end. And I said, "No, that was acting." And, but I knew at that point, like, this guy has heard the stuff and he knows our music.
Yeah.
He knows stuff that I wrote. And it was like, basically made everything that I'd ever done in music worth it. All the playing in little clubs and riding around in vans and everything, all the struggle, it was worth it, like right then. And he recorded it, and then I waited like 20 years, and then I got an email from him, I guess earlier this year, and he's like, "Hey, Monty, I want to send you that album." And he's like, "It's done." And I'm like, incredible, And so to sit back and hear it now, I got a really small part on it, but that was plenty. I was just so thrilled to be a part of that and look on the liner notes and see my name in between all these guys from Kansas. It was the greatest thrill for me, because I was just such a huge fan of him in Kansas, and still am. So.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. So here's a small world. Ready for this? Mm-hmm. His house is a mile away from the church that I pastor, which is where we're recording this podcast. And he goes to church a half a mile up the road at the Baptist church down the street. So
really,
yeah. He's, and, I met him years ago doing the radio program, because he was here. We live in the same city, and when I was doing that radio program, and he had left Kansas, obviously, and felt a conviction to do something different. And I really liked. He did a song with Dio on vocals. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, I've got that album.
Oh, it's great. AD, and I can't remember the song, The Mask of the Great Deceiver.
Sure.
And he did another one. He did like 2 songs with them, but Ronnie James Dio told the story that he was singing the song, and he ad-libbed part of it, and he had felt overwhelmed in the studio. And he walks out and he sits down, he looks at Kerry and he goes, "What was that?" And he's like, "That's the Lord, man." It was awesome. So Kerry told the story on the show, and it was just really neat. But he's
Kerry's awesome, man.
He is, dude. Leftoverture blew me away as a young man. I had a brother that was a prog rock freak in the 70s. I have several older brothers, and so I got indoctrinated. I had older parents, so I had to deal with like Neil Diamond and Neil Sedaka and things like that. And then I get the indoctrination of Leftoverture at the age of like 5 years old, and it blew me away. I remember, Genesis, Zeppelin, all this stuff when I was a kid. Anyway, so Left Overture always left its mark, and it was cool to meet Kerry years later. I'm glad you had one too.
Well, I had very strict Christian parents, and they wouldn't even let me listen to rock music for, until pretty much until I left the home, left the house for college. I mean, it was like I was kind of sneaking around listening to it, but if they ever caught me like listening to like even Elton John or anything, they were like, what is that? And then I go off and learn how to play guitar, and then I played my dad a demo from off our first album, and it ended with these 4-part harmonies, and he just sat there and went, that is it, man. That is great. That is going to go. And he turned into the biggest Galactic fan.
Wow.
That I ever had, and him and my mom would like drive and come see our shows, and he ended up with a jacket with the Galactic logo on the back. And he was just
that's awesome. Awesome.
He was like my biggest fan.
Yeah. Now, how did you land in Kansas City? What did you move there for work, or did you just?
Well, I went to school in I went to high school in a place called Nevada, Missouri, small town, and I went to college in Springfield, Missouri, at SMS.
Okay.
Which is now Missouri State. But I moved to Houston, stayed there for like 11 years, and then moved back to Kansas City. It was kind of, I wanted to get closer to my family, and I knew they didn't have, a lot of years left. So I wanted to move back to be closer to them. And so that was kind of the deal.
Okay. Now, my wife is from Denver.
Right.
She's a transplant.
Nice.
So we have this prenuptial agreement we signed about the AFC West rivalry.
Right.
We just don't watch the game.
Right.
Same room on Sundays, twice a year. Right. No,
yeah.
Just kidding. But so you obviously, I bring that up because you moved from Kansas City to around the Denver area, correct?
I did. I'm real close to Denver now. Go there all the time for games, and I've kind of become like a local sports fan, except for the Broncos. I still root for the Chiefs. And
well, you got the Avs and the Rockies. That's pretty cool.
In fact, my girlfriend and I went to see the Chiefs Broncos game last year here in Denver. And I sat there in my Chiefs gear and rooted for them. I wasn't too obnoxious, but still got to be a Chiefs fan. But I'm turning over to the the Nuggets and the Rockies, and of course my Avs just won the.
Yes, they did.
Game.
Yes, they did.
I love the Avs.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That
was a great final. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
When did you start the Rockcast? So tell our listeners, some of your fans, about how Monty's Rockcast came about.
I did these little things that I would tape on a tape recorder when I was a kid, and I would do these little shows. And so when podcasts, really early started, I started downloading anybody that had a show, and there weren't that many at the time,
right?
And I always thought, man, I would love to do that. And around 2009 my dad passed away. Actually, it was 2008, and my dad passed away, and I inherited it wasn't a lot, but I inherited a small amount of money, and I took it. And I bought a Mac computer, a Mac laptop, and you could make a website on there. You could make a podcast, and you could put the podcast on the website. And it just was like, wow, I can finally do this. And so I started making these shows, and, the early ones were just really bad. I was just really bad at it. And, but on the early ones, I would go through all the Galactic albums and kind of go song by song and tell my thoughts, and whatnot. And after I covered all the albums and all the crunchy albums, and I was like, okay, well, now I'm going to branch out and start talking about other things, just music or TV or whatever. And I just kept doing it. And over the years, more and more people started listening. And I don't have any idea right now how many people listen, but I get a lot of email from people, a lot of feedback, and I'm currently recording my 250th episode.
Wow.
So, it started in 2008. I'm still doing them.
So your content, what do you like to, obviously it's shaped over the years. It's definitely molded and changed a little bit, but what is your favorite part of what you do about it with it now?
I think just being able to tell people, just my thoughts. It's kind of a little audio diary of my life, because each month I just kind of tell what I've been doing. And, I talk about sports. I try to stay away from politics because I know that upsets people, but now and then I have to drop in my feelings about the current state of the world and whatnot. But my favorite part is probably just exposing people to new music. If I get an album that I'm really loving, I'll talk about it and play a couple of clips off of it, and just kind of expose people to stuff that they may not hear otherwise.
Right on. That's awesome. Now, your biggest, I think a lot of people need to check this out. Monty Colvin art. You're an amazing artist. You did an awful lot of. You did most of, or tell us, I guess, how many of the album covers you actually did. So you've obviously been an artist for a long time.
Yeah.
We've got to show. Well, while we're talking about this, if it's okay with your approval, I'd like Gage to show a few pictures of your.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll just use this moment right now to share some of your pictures. So you hand draw, and then what is the type of art, the method that you call it?
Yeah, I draw everything out in pencil, and then I start painting it. I use acrylics. And I make paintings. I sell paintings. If you want to commission me, I do that. I do a lot of rock stars and things like that I like. But I do all kinds of stuff. I'll do family portraits, or I'll do hockey players. It just whatever I feel like. But and then. That's the thing. I make a lot of my art these days into prints that people can buy if they can't afford the paintings.
Yeah, you're really reasonably priced on your prints.
Oh yeah, they're pretty cheap. They're cheaper than going to like Applebee's for dinner.
Yeah, Yeah.
So,
I think people will see by the time we air this and the pictures they just saw. You're the real deal, Monty. You are a very gifted artist. I do have on our wall one of my favorite renderings of yours, the gas mask with the cowboy hat,
right?
And the old man with the spacesuit.
Yeah.
So tell us who that is in that spacesuit. That
album cover was for Space in Your Face, and the guy we originally used was just this older gentleman that Ben knew, that used to work on a ranch there in Houston. And we just asked him if he'd, pose in this spacesuit. And he did it, and it ended up being the cover.
That's awesome.
But, after we left Geffen, I talked to Brian from Metal Blade, and I said, could I just do the art myself? And he's like, yeah, you do whatever you want.
That's awesome.
Most of the time he liked it a lot, but
yeah. Well,
that's kind of that's where I got a lot of exposure. I actually started, I went to college and I got a degree in art. So that's where I kind of got some of my, training was in college. But you can get a lot of good stuff on YouTube also. So
Sure.
if I had it to do over, I'd probably just watch YouTube.
Fair enough.
Save the 30 grand or whatever it was.
So this is kind of the time in our focus time with you with fellow freaks, and I'd like to just ask a couple of fun questions. First thing that comes to your mind, if you can kind of roll it off. But one question I want to ask you: who is single-handedly, musically, your biggest influence that you can really attribute? Really, I mean, I know there's going to be a lot, but who's the one band that you can say this one really affected me the most?
Well, that's tough. I mean, early on, my first influences that made me play guitar were like Peter Frampton, Ted Nugent, and, I mentioned Kerry, but from then, I loved Metallica. They influenced my writing style, in the late 80s and early 90s. I mean, it's all over the place. My favorite band is probably the Wild Hearts. But
I saw that. It really influenced you with Crunchy. That's pretty cool. That's not a band that people know about. So
but I took all these different things that I love, like the Beatles. I grew up, liking the Beatles. And so I just kind of took a lot of those things and melded them together and, tried to make something different out of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Favorite Galactic Cowboys song?
I should know this.
Or maybe one that you're most proud of.
Well, I mean, it's kind of different. Like as far as like songs we recorded, probably something like "You Make Me Smile." I really thought that was really different for back when we recorded it.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff now that, metalcore wise, that reminds me of what we were doing in 91.
Yeah.
But, I mean, live, probably my favorite song to play live is either If I Were a Killer or The 9th of June, just songs that I can really get into and, move and stuff like that. But, it's hard to say as far as favorite song.
Okay.
There were a lot of them.
Yeah, I'll throw it down to your live favorites. I'll make note of that.
Okay.
One part that I liked on Stress, when you,
that's a favorite live song too.
No. So nobody had ever done that before. I had ever heard that before, and I was just really going, oh, and it's like on the dissension of that part, before the chorus, and I'm like, dude, that is such a. Check it out. I'm going to make Gage listen to Stress as soon as we get done with this.
I'm on it.
Okay. What have you found best place to eat in Denver? What's a local fave?
We mainly eat at the stadium.
Stadium food.
I haven't been to it.
Everything or nothing.
We went to this one fish place, but I don't remember the name of it. So.
Right on. Monty's Fish.
I'm pretty simple when it comes to music or to food. I'm not hard to please.
I always work food into my questions, Monty, because I'm a fatty. So that's all there is to it. That's just gonna.
Well, I'm getting there.
Okay. Who catches more receiving yards this upcoming 2022 season? Tyreek Hill or anybody on the Chiefs?
I'm going to go ahead and predict that Tyreek has a really rough season because he left and he should not have.
Can we just agree right now that Pops and Beach know what they're doing, and they just drafted 2 stud wide receivers to go along with Juju and Valdez-Scantling, and I think we're just fine.
Yeah, somehow, I think we'll be all right because, I was telling my girlfriend the other day, there's certain organizations that they know how to draft.
Mhm.
They know personnel better than the other teams. The Avalanche is one of those teams that just gets it right when it comes to drafting players. The Rockies and the Royals, not so much. They make with their draft picks. And so, I feel like finally in Kansas City, the Chiefs have got some good guys that know what they're doing with personnel.
Agreed.
So I do have hope that they're going to be all right.
Yeah. It's like the Royals and Rockies are, no matter what, they're still considered small markets, and they just
can't afford to keep anybody.
No, they can't. And when they do keep them, I don't know. I'm a huge Alex Gordon fan.
Oh, me too.
And then just like people are like, they signed the wrong guy. I don't know. Did they? Because that's the guy that's the consummate professional that helped him for a couple more years anyway, even though he was, descending as a player. And I don't know.
I loved Alex because he was like, this is my home. I want to stay.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Eric Hosmer, I think the Royals offered him over $140 million.
Yes.
And he's like, no, going to San Diego, where he's just kind of drifted off into obscurity there,
Well, the ownership actually dodged a huge bullet by not signing him because he ended up becoming a mediocre player.
Yeah, and he could have owned that town for the rest of his career if he stayed. And so I was disappointed in that, but that's the way it seems to go. They develop people and then have to let them go, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, agreed. Monty, I like to end all of our fellow freaks with giving you an opportunity to say whatever it is you want to say as like a Monty's nugget of wisdom. Would you mind just anything you want to just, if you're passionate about something today or recently or whatever, brother, the floor is yours. Give us your final thoughts.
Well, I won't get political. So I'll just say, go to my website, montycolvinart.com, and check it out, and check out my podcast, montysrockcast.com. And that's about it. Help a guy out, help your starving artists out, people.
You got it.
Be nice. Goes to a good cause, my rent.
That's right. Pay the guy's rent. We're the pastor, Vodi Bakum. He actually resides now. He moved from Texas down to Zambia, Africa. He's got 9 children, and he's the dean of a seminary down there. And he literally tells the kids, or he told the last, he came back to the States to do a conference, and he told everybody, hey, go out in the lobby when you're done. You can check out the books, whatever. You'll help feed starving African children. And he had to pause because everybody's like, oh, your children. I got it. So, anyway, it's a great line, but
no kidding.
Hey, Monty, you're a great brother, man. I appreciate you a lot. And for all of our friends that'll get a chance to check this out, please make sure you check out the website that he talked about, the Rockcast, and his art, and patron it. It's you're not going to be disappointed when you check out the website. I think you're going to be really happy about the opportunity to buy prints and share it with your friends. Monty, you're always really generous with replying back. You were really cool with making the time for us today. Can't tell you thanks enough, brother. And
thanks.
We run into Kerry soon. I'll make sure to tell him hi for you. Okay.
Definitely.
All right, brother.
Well, thanks so much, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Hey, don't mind if you want to plug our that you appeared with us. I'd appreciate that too.
Absolutely will.
All right, brother. I'll send you a link to it.
All right.
All right. Take care, Monty.
Good. Thank you. You
Thanks.
too. Take care.
You too.